All right, all right. The recording has started. Good evening. It's great to see you all. Thank you for making the journeys here. We're getting started just a few minutes after 6. But we have plenty of time together this evening. It's great to see you all. I'm Vivian Satterfield, she, her, your Chief Sustainability Officer. For those in the room, we've got plenty of food up here. Please make sure you nourish yourself during the meeting. And just want to acknowledge that, as these meetings become more well attended and as we're starting to get our cadence, we'll have more and more members of the public and also city staff who will be joining us time to time. So we've got a number of folks who are joining us in the audience who are city staff. You'll become familiar with some of them in future presentations. Just kind of want to give you that awareness. And I am going to go ahead and hand this over to one of our co-chairs, Jose, to take on the rest of the slides.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Jose Gamero Georgeson, co-chair. My pronouns are he, him, él. And I'm here with co-chair Isa Taylor, who will be co-facilitating today with me. Again, I want to thank Interplay for the facilitator guidance they've been giving us all along. As you all know, we will no longer have Interplay here at these meetings. We will have them one more time to help us with the bylaws and the bylaws subcommittee, but we won't have them here anymore. But I do appreciate the help they've given us, and they've also helped us a little bit prepare for facilitating the meeting. Next slide, please. First thing, the agenda, what we're going to go through today. Public comment, updates. We have a couple of briefings today. So that's mainly what we're going to be doing. Packed with information from subject matter experts across the city. They're presented by the climate team at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So thank you for joining us. And I'll pass it over to Isa. Next slide.
Recording in progress.
I'm co-chair Isa Taylor. My pronouns are he, him. So firstly, thank you all for coming and welcome to our Sustainability and Climate Commission meeting. And just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and there'll be more reminders later in the slides. Next slide. So firstly, for this meeting, we're going to be going over some quick notes, our adopted working agreement and continued process improvements, which includes a vote. Next slide. So for some notes about this meeting's being recorded on Zoom. It'll be posted online for transparency. And commissioners, please ensure that your Zoom name reflects your title. So please make sure to shorten it. And commissioners, please make sure to raise your hand on Zoom and the facilitator will call on you if you have a question. And remember to state your name, title, and pronouns every time you speak. For public comment, individuals will be called on by the facilitator, and all materials can be found on the meeting's event page at this link. And also for tech help, remember to ask Wayne Grabowski. So, next slide. And so for our working agreements, we adopted these at our last commission meeting. Can I have a commissioner or volunteer to read the bold sections aloud?
You want to play? I'll do the first. Okay. Commissioner Alina Pachlearn. Speak with clarity and focus. Wait. Assume good intentions, but attend to impact.
Be willing to make mistakes and be forgiving of those who do. Commissioner Luna Gonzalez, she, her. Allow for and appreciate disagreement of opinions, ideas, methods respectfully. Build on other people's ideas. We value participation, both in person and virtual.
Thank you, Commissioners Pachlearn and Gonzalez. Next slide, I'd like to pass it to co-chair Gamero Georgeson.
Thank you, Jose Gamero Georgeson, he, him, male pronouns. Again, just reminders about previous and ongoing process improvements. For quorum, we are working with the simple majority, 50% plus 1. The full commission, with the full commission here, it'd be 11 for the majority. The bylaws committee is 5. The alternates do not count towards the quorum. Please, when you get an email from Elaine asking for quorum requests, please do respond. We can prepare better for the meetings that way if we know you're not going to make it. So please respond to those. For document amendments, we completed the new process the last meeting we were here. That's when it was up there, and we were trying very hard to keep everything together. I think we did pretty well with that new process. So we're gonna keep that going forward. We received some feedback about it, about the process, and we're definitely open to more feedback. So please let us know if you think of ways to make that better, if what worked for you and what didn't. For voting, we've completed the new process at the last meeting with the different proposals and used modified consensus at the last meeting. Now, this part's important. For external communications and disclosure, we want to make sure we have interim guidelines until we have bylaws that we pass. So the bylaws will have what we all agree on to be our guidelines, but until we do that, we do have some interim ones. First, using our portlandoregon.gov email account. That's for commission work. All communications through that are for work as commissioner. Please note that when you're sending an email from your Portland.gov email account, no matter what, everyone's gonna take it as a commissioner. You're speaking as a commissioner. So if you have something else that you want to speak to that is personal, your own viewpoint, that you're not speaking for the commission, just use your personal email account, so you're not representing the whole commission as a commissioner. The same goes with whenever you're speaking, when you're speaking before anything, you're doing any kind of testimony, you can state that you're on the commission, but please state that you're speaking on your own behalf and not on behalf of the commission. And also, it's also really helpful to let Elaine and the staff know that you will be doing that, so they know, because do know that even though you say that you're speaking on behalf of yourself, they will still get emails and questions about the testimony you might give or any questions like that. So just give the staff a heads up so they can prepare for that if those do come in. If you get any media requests or like interest groups, anything like that with questions, please notify Vivian, the Chief Sustainability Officer, the co-chairs, and the commission coordinator, Elaine. And then we'll best coordinate. In past groups I've been, we had our own guidelines for how we would handle all those things, and we will come up with our own as well when we pass the bylaws. That's a conversation we're gonna have. But for now, any requests, just make them go through the staff so that we know exactly what's going on. When it comes to conversations, meetings, communication, anything outside of these public meetings, we have to be careful that what we're doing doesn't constitute a public meeting. So there's certain things we need to make sure happen, and all three of these have to be met so that it doesn't trigger the need for a public meeting. It can't be quorum. There can't be more than a certain number. Like we said, the full commission is 11, and for the bylaws is 5. So the number of commissioners in the meeting does not constitute quorum. It also can't be anything that's gonna be recommended to the commission. So if it's something we're talking about and deciding now, you can't have like a pre-meeting to try to convince another commissioner of what they should recommend. We can have meetings to gather information, but we can't be convincing each other or trying to like debate certain topics before. Again, these are not our rules. These are the state of Oregon rules that we have to abide by. And obviously, a smaller group can't ever make a decision or speak on behalf of the whole commission without the whole commission voting on that. In the future, we will choose to vote on certain things and have stances that we have that we can then share out at a testimony or whatever, but we have to decide as a group that that's okay at any given point. But if you're trying to find information for something we're gonna talk about, or talking about research or where to go for that information, that's always allowed. Collect information, all that is gonna be work we're gonna be doing at all times behind the scenes, so that's okay. Best practices for all these things, as always, if you're not sure what to do, just always notify. I would say just email Elaine, notify the commission coordinator and be like, this came up. Is this okay that I do this? And after time, it'll be like, yeah, it's fine. Better do it early in the process, give a heads up, makes it a lot easier. You could always reach out to us, Isa or myself as the co-chairs or whoever the co-chairs in the future. But still, I always say copy Elaine. Everything copy Elaine. That's my go-to. Anything we talk about in these meetings is public information. And so anything we cover here, you can talk to other people about, of course, because it's public. All of this is recorded. Someone can go online. You can communicate to anyone about the stuff we're talking about here, but we are talking to media, even if it's you're saying exactly what we covered in the meeting, please still just let staff know that someone's reached out to you or you have done any of this, because it never fails that it always gets back to them and they're like, oh, I have no idea what this was coming from. So it's always best just to always let staff know. And they can also help you with guidance, tips, or connect you with other staff if you need more resources. Later on, we have more work product that needs to be shared out more. We could even ask someone from the city, because I know we've gotten like media training on like how to best communicate some of this information, but that's way down the line. We don't have that kind of stuff yet. But it's always best to reach out and they will help you and point you in the right direction what to do. Like I said before, we cannot ever talk on behalf of the commission unless the commission has decided that's okay. I know I've said that before. But there will be times where we'll be testifying on behalf of the commission. So but we should all be aware that that's happening before it happens. Yeah, and that's a lot. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out to me or Elaine and we will help you with that. If you have any questions. Next slide, please. Okay. So we've received mixed feedback on how to best address commissioners and alternates. So we've heard Commissioner Gamera Georgeson or Commissioner Jose. So we have to vote to make on this. And the question is really how to address commissioners and alternates by first or last name. So I'll facilitate some discussion around this question. And once we come to an end of the discussion, someone will have to move a proposal forward that we'll take a vote on. And then once we have a proposal, I'll call a vote. So are there any Zoom hands or any opinions on how we should address each other, first or last name? Commissioner Trifon?
I would be fine with, Dan Trifon, D3, him. I'd be fine with first name. Personally.
Thank you. Commissioner Kaza?
Commissioner Casa, Stephanie. Leave the.
Now, good. Finger pronouns. I recommended by the last name, and so I'll tell you my reasoning was I thought that was more common, and we have to be corrected for other official meetings. And also it feels more formal, and that we would, I'm imagining, gain more respect from our listeners out there by using the last names. So those are some reasons for going that way.
Thank you. Anyone else have? Oh, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Hi, Commissioner Luna Gonzalez, she, her. I would propose that we use first names. To me, that feels like more approachable and accessible, and I think it feels like it makes more sense for members of the public to be able to understand who we are.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Trifon?
Dan Trifon, he, him, D3. My last name is complicated to pronounce. And like, if you come from a very specific place, it is Trifone. I usually tell people it's Trifone. It's not an easy name to be like, oh, how do we say this? Dan is easy. And also, I really agree with Commissioner Luna Gonzalez in that like it's accessible as well to just say my name that you can see. Thank you.
Alternate Chen?
Carla Chen, she, her. I agree. As a second language speaker, sometimes I feel that the last name are harder to pronounce. So my option would be for the first.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Raise your hand down.
Commissioner Chandas?
Hi, Commissioner Shonda, we're figuring this out. D2, he, him. Just a clarification, is this like set, is this set for all commissioners coming on it for perpetuity, or is this for this particular group?
Well, I think we're voting it for us to use going forward. So it's not other groups, just what we prefer to be called. I have no preference, but my last name is very long. And it's often mispronounced. So. Commissioner Duncan?
Here we go. Yep. Oh. Yes, thank you. Oh, Jesus. All right. Am I just on one now? That's progress. Good. So my first name is probably harder to pronounce than my last name, but I still think, we ought to go by first names. I've served on, lots of governmental bodies like this, and at least in Oregon, they've all tended to be a little on the informal side. And that's kind of what I expect when I'm on a board or a commission. I know, there are times when you need to be formal, but when we're just having a conversation among, us folks, I would assume go with first names.
Thank you.
Not
Commissioner Kaza?
Cosno, she, her pronouns. So just out of point of curiosity, is there a common practice? This is helpful, what Commissioner Angus just said. Trying out.
you pronounce that very well.
What does the city council do? What do other meeting bodies do? Is there anything that's generalized in the city or?
I think if you look at city council, they use last names. If you see like the county commission, they use last names. But if you look at other bodies that are smaller on ours, there's a mixed bag of last names and first names, just like, so there is a mix, and it's really up to us to decide that this. Commissioner, someone else now. Ruiz?
I don't mind either or. I think last names sound more formal and professional, but then I do agree that it's more personable if we use our first names.
Seeing no more hands, do we have a motion or a proposal? Commissioner Trifon?
Yeah, motion to use first names.
We have a motion to use first names. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Okay. And we'll go for a vote.
Clarification?
Sure.
Clarification?
Sure.
Vivek Shandas, D2, he, him. The phrase commissioner is in front of this regardless of, so,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Okay, so now we're gonna go for a vote. This I'm not sure about. In every other group I have, the staff member calls the vote. Is that the case or do I call the vote? Okay. Okay, so just as a reminder, there's 3 ways to vote. You can vote affirmative, stand aside, which is kind of affirmative, but you have no real preference, like you have reservations, but you're fine with it. Or no. No, probably if you want last names, you would vote no. Okay, so I will go down, we'll do roll call. And I'll go by first name, since I've been doing last name so far. Commissioner Alina,
Do I say what I?
yes, stand
Okay.
aside or no?
Commissioner Alina, Pachler, she, her. Oh, wait, sorry. Affirmative, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Angus,
Commissioner Angus, aye.
Commissioner Celeste,
Commissioner Celeste, stand aside.
thank you. Commissioner Charity,
Hi, this is Commissioner Charity Fain, she, her, and I also vote yes.
thank you. Commissioner Damon,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Dan,
Affirmative.
thank you. Commissioner Dana,
Affirmative.
thank you. Commissioner Galen,
Affirmative.
thank you. Commissioner Greg,
Affirmative.
thank you. Commissioner Jessica,
Affirmative.
thank you. Commissioner Leah,
Affirmative.
thank you. Commissioner Luna,
Affirmative.
thank you. Commissioner Maya. Commissioner Maya absent, thank you. Commissioner Nora, thank you. Commissioner Shreya. Absent, thank you. Commissioner Stephanie, thank you. Commissioner Seuss,
Affirmative.
thank you. Commissioner Vivek,
Affirmative.
thank you. Co-chair Isa,
Affirmative.
and I also vote for Chair Jose, also vote affirmative. Passes with all affirmatives or stand asides. So we will be using first names for here forward. Thank you very much. Elaine, can you record the vote, please? Great, next slide. Oh, already, great. So the next agenda item is public comment. And we do have someone signed up, and Albert Kaufman. And is Albert here or is it on Zoom? Okay, so Albert is not here or on Zoom. Okay. So seeing that there's no other public testimony signed up, we'll move on to the next slide and I'll pass it over to Co-Chair Isa.
Co-chair Taylor, co-chair Isa, pronouns are he, him. And so our next agenda item for today is commission updates. Next slide. So we have a couple commission updates. Firstly, that unfortunately alternate B Sloan had to resign. So thank you, B, for your service. And now I'd like to invite Chief Sustainability Officer Vivian Satterfield to give us her CSO report, and I'll facilitate any questions or discussion.
Sure. For the record, Vivian Satterfield, Chief Sustainability Officer. In the interest of the agenda time, I'll keep it short and sweet. Many of you are aware that we're having a significant change in our city leadership. We appreciate Michael Jordan for his leadership as the city administrator, especially during this last year. And we are looking forward to welcoming Raymond Lee, who's going to be the incoming city administrator. His first day on the job is going to be December 29th. So hopefully you'll have opportunities to meet him soon. I look forward to working with him and furthering the work of this commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Sustainability Officer Vivian, and again, for the record, my name's, I'm co-chair Issa, my pronouns are he, him. So now first, updates on our executive sessions. So they occur between the co-chairs, the CSO, the commission coordinator, and our invited guests, so the interplay facilitators. And so at the meeting, we discussed the facilitator role and best practices. And so again, thank you to our interplay facilitators. They gave us a foundation for facilitating that we plan to use as a commission, and they actually created a facilitation best practices framework for facilitators moving forward. We also talked about agenda setting for the new year and discussed feedback from the commissioners, which we got through the documents we send out after every meeting, through electronic communication and in-person communication. And remember to feel free to reach out to me and Jose as co-chairs if you have any questions or if you want to provide feedback or ideas. And so for the bylaws committee meeting, Senior Deputy Maya Hayam joined us to review law documents that impacted the commission and our bylaws. So we reviewed the initial bylaws draft and set a timeline to finalize amendments by March to bring to the full commission to adopt. And so lastly, for the youth-led retreat, so it's going to occur on Monday, February 23rd from 5 to 8 p.m. in person and required for all commissioners. We started planning the retreat earlier this month with PSU partners. And so for the retreat, youth commissioners will be working with their PSU mentors, interplay facilitators, and the commission coordinator in January to finalize the agenda for CSO approval. Are there any questions? Okay, next slide. So our next agenda item is our first briefing on climate planning and action in Portland. Next slide. So this past summer, our assigned readings included the Climate Action Plan from 2015 and our current Climate Action Plan, the Climate Emergency Work Plan, and the progress reports. So for everyone's reference, these are all linked in this meeting's event page. And so we as commissioners are looking forward to dig into these documents. And so today we actually get to hear from Climate Policy Manager Andrea Jacob and the Climate Program Coordinator Pam Neal from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on Climate Planning and Action in Portland from 1992 to 2025. So I'll make sure to monitor the chat and any raised Zoom hands for questions. And so lastly, I'd like to thank Andrea and Pam for being here. We're all excited for your briefing.
Thank you, Co-Chair Issa. Can you hear me? Good evening, everyone. Andrea Jacob. Stillmore. She, her, Climate Policy Manager with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And I'm with Pam Neal, who will introduce herself a little bit further into the presentation. Thank you so much. We're excited to be at the stage where we're actually talking about the content. We know that there's a range of sort of experience levels, knowledge levels, entering the conversation. So for some of you, this is going to be very old hat and well traveled ground. And for others, it's going to be fairly brand new. So we're trying to strike that line, especially when we get to Kyle's presentation a little bit later, which is fairly technical. So we are here to talk about sort of the history of how we got to this point. And I have been at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Well, I've been at the city since 2005 and BPS since it was created in 2009 and really working on climate and energy pretty much that whole time. So wasn't here from the beginning, but it's been a minute. And so I feel now sort of like the legacy storyteller and the keeper of Portland. Kyle and I together, the three of us have been around for a while. So, okay, Elaine, are you driving?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So our agenda today, you're going to hear a lot of information. So we're going to start just by giving you the key takeaways. So right up front, I'm just going to, spoiler alert, we're not going to bury the lead. We'll just tell you the main points and we're going to repeat them at the end. So if you don't remember anything in between, you'll at least know at the front and the back what the main takeaways are. But we will spend a little bit of time talking about our history, the current climate action plan, which we call the Climate Emergency Work Plan. And we have parting gifts for you. So you will get your own very own original copy of this document, which is now somewhat past its prime, but it is the only plan we have until you all do a new one. So, and we have extras, so we thought we would give them to you. And then, oops, I'm still on the agenda, I think. Too bad.
Sorry. Oh, back.
Yeah. And then we'll talk, we wanted to give you a sense of some of the progress that's been made and some of the signature projects that are happening across our community, and then talk a little bit about what's ahead and in the challenge. Next slide, please. So in terms of key takeaways, there are 30 years plus of climate analysis, data tracking, best practices, peer city engagement. We know what reduces carbon. And so, and from the, just speaking about the decarbonization side, you know, getting our world out of this carbon death spiral, the what is very well known. So it's really, we're not really arguing anymore about what to do. The conversation is much more about how, when, and who pays. So to the next point, we need the funding and the political will. It's not really a matter of what, but these major questions. You'll see that the old climate plans are very large. They have hundreds of pages, hundreds of actions. The Climate Emergency Work Plan was an attempt to pare that down a little bit. Where we're at currently is we feel, as our advice from as staff to you all, that less is more. That instead of spreading ourselves thin and maybe not doing a lot of things or doing a lot of things a little bit, it's probably best to hone in and do a couple of things really well, high impact things. The ability of the city of Portland to reach its climate goals, there are a lot of things that are just out of our control. We have a few levers that we can pull, but one of the main points is that our ability to reach climate targets is very, very dependent on the electric utilities, Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, to reach their goals. And the gas issue in Northwest Natural is slightly different, but from a straight decarbonization perspective, what happens with the electric utilities, our fate is tied together. So we need to work very closely with them and hold them accountable for the goals that have been established for them at the state level. The climate plan, or our next work ahead of us, really should focus on where the city does have its authority. And there are direct things that the city can do, levers it can pull itself. And there's things that it does in partnership and collaboration with soft power, with bully pulpit power, with all of those things that elected officials can do. So our advice is to, and the Climate Emergency Work Plan was an attempt to do this, to really hone in on the things that were within the sphere of control of our local elected government, understanding that many things are within the purview of the state and sometimes even outside of that at the federal level. And then lastly, the key takeaway is you may have noticed that the city has a number of competing crises. They call this the poly crisis. We have a housing and houselessness crisis. We have an economic development and economic prosperity problem in the city of Portland. And I would say that the elected officials are, and from the last city council to this council, are really focused a lot on those issues and connecting climate to that wherever possible, making it about the intersection of housing, economic development, and climate. Is our observation that that's a successful way to package this, that leading with climate alone and first has not really broken through the noise, not from our perspective. So this council is very different, and there are definitely climate champions on it, but the outer context, the surrounding context, seems to have an extremely strong sway right now. And there are connections and nexuses here between these issues, but it's our job to find them and to be able to sell this to the people that are going to be making the decision. I also wanted to say that you can ask questions during, you don't have to wait till the end, especially if they're clarifying questions, deeper discussion things we can save for the end, but certainly feel free to pop in and someone can let me know. Okay. So these are the climate plans. We were the first city in the country to have a plan to address carbon dioxide emissions. And that was in 1993, that image to the far left. I suspect that some of you in the room that
Floppy disk.
don't even know what a floppy disk is, or maybe you've heard tell, but you've never actually seen one. In 2001 was the first time that the city partnered with Multnomah County. And that's why when Kyle talks about the carbon emissions inventory, he'll talk about it in context of Multnomah County. Our jurisdictional boundary for how we measure and count carbon is the county. It's not the city of Portland alone. And that's not unheard of, but it is also not the most common way. Often it's just the city boundary itself. So we are a little bit unusual that way. The first time I did a climate plan was in 2009. Honestly, don't remember too much about it. That was a really long time ago. I do remember the 2015 climate plan, and that one is really worth spending a little time on just because it was such a watershed plan. It was the first time we did a number of things. We added a consumption-based emissions inventory to it. Kyle will talk about that. We also addressed climate, well, what we now call climate resilience, then we called climate preparation. Sometimes it's called adaptation. There were many discussions back in the day about what to call it. And adaptation, nobody liked, thought it was too technical. Resilience wasn't even a word that we talked about. So preparation was in the 2015 climate plan. And then most importantly, the 2015 plan was the first time we really integrated the concepts of racial equity and climate justice and intentionally pulled that in to our climate planning. Not saying that we necessarily did that in the most effective way or the best way, but it was a huge learning opportunity. We learned a lot from it. It won international awards for the best climate plan in the world, I think, at that time from C40. So it was very much a groundbreaking plan. And because of that work in racial equity, that really changed the trajectory of how the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and our climate team started to do our climate work. And we had heard from community members, especially communities of color, that the way we had done climate planning up to that point had not really benefited their communities or all of Portland communities, and that we really needed to do it differently and really reconsider how we were doing our climate planning. And that prompted a lot of internal reflection, a big change in kind of how we approach the work, and also kind of brought our work a little bit to a halt in climate planning. We spent a long time in space with community trying to figure out what was the right level of power dynamic, of power sharing, of idea generation, and really trying to do it differently. In 2020, we'd been in that conversation for a couple of years. In 2020, we did work with a lot of community advocacy to get the climate emergency declaration passed. And that was a very climate justice forward expression of values around, how we were going to do our work. And it called for a climate justice initiative and really, again, creating what we called third space, which was not driven necessarily only by government and not necessarily only by community, but this collaborative in-between space. And so we kept talking and we kept being at the table, but we weren't generating a plan. And so in 2021-ish, late 2021, that brings us to the climate emergency work plan. We had some new leadership at the Bureau that had felt that maybe it was time to we need a new plan. And it wasn't going to be done in the way that any of the old plans had been done. And it probably won't be the way that this plan is done. It was really conceived of as a particular moment in time. We needed to solve a problem. It had been 7 years since we had done a plan. The 2015 plan had expired. The planning horizon was done. And we really needed to, it needed to basically come into being in a very short amount of time. And so we decided that this was not the time to do a large public process around the plan. We had been doing a lot of process. We'd been doing a lot of community engagement on really specific policy areas. The idea was that the actions within the plan were where we were going to spend our community engagement time and focus. But again, this idea that we know what the what is, that we didn't need to spend a lot of time reconceiving what needed to be in the plan. We just really needed to go talk to city council, and we needed a vehicle to do it. These are the priorities of the city based on a lot of community engagement, a lot of community input, and staff expertise combined, and really focused on what was in the realm of city council's authority and purview to do in the next within the 3-year planning horizon. So we also knew that this body was coming into existence and that we were having a whole change of government. So this wasn't intended to be the end all be all. It really served a purpose, and it did that. And now its time is done, and we're on to this new era. So I think, Elaine, if you could. I'm now going to hand it off to Pam to talk more specifically about this and what's in it.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. Pam Neal, she, her. I'll just, is that better? All right. Pam Neal, she, her. I work on the climate team and have a long history of climate planning, like Andrea mentioned. I would say between Kyle and Andrea and I, we've got a solid 60 years of climate planning work on behalf of all of you and all of the citizens of Portland. And so I guess I would say, slow me down if I talk too fast. It's really important that we share language. And I think Andrea acknowledged this. We're all in different places around climate, carbon emission reductions, decarbonization. Some of these words weren't around when I started my work with the city, and they won't stick around. So slow us down, ask questions, just encourage that. So here we are with the climate emergency work plan. Andrea mentioned that our first, the plan itself was published in 2021 with the intention that we would have 3 years of progress reports. So I have been managing those progress reports for the last 3 years. I was also on the team way back in 2009 and 2015 with our climate planning. So the current plan, it's the one that says 2024-25 on it. Sorry, the report. Yeah, this is the progress report. Thank you. Is divided into 2 primary sections: decarbonization, which is like our mitigation work, and resilience, which is the adaptation or preparation work that Andrea was talking about. There's 47 actions within the report. There's 50 staff plus behind me here that have been contributing. They're the real experts in this work. They're made up of 10 different bureaus. Primarily, we have done these 3 annual progress reports. And in the last report, we included 3 progress indicators. And those indicators are a reflection back on the last 3 years of the work. As staff, we wanted to acknowledge where we're making great progress with excellent, there's steady work, and then there's this needs to accelerate section. So I'll talk about all of that a bit more in the presentation. Next slide, please. So I included the next few slides not to dig deep because you get Kyle, who's the real expert here, on it later this evening. But I wanted to show you this because it's an indicator of where we are. So you're seeing the percent change in carbon emissions since 1990. This is Multnomah County data from 2023. And you'll see the little where we are here, where we are mark, and then 50% at 2030 and net zero at 2050. So the real purpose of this is to just highlight the steep curve where we've been and the steep slope downward on those carbon emission reductions where we need to go. Next slide. Oh, hands.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. Hang a second. So, if you could go back 1 slide. So looking at the recent slope of that line, and then looking at the slope that it has to achieve between now and 2030 and 2050. So is there a short list of the priority actions the city can and is committed to taking or could be committed to taking that would narrow, that would erase that delta?
Well, I'm going to go back to one of the key takeaways, which is that our ability to do that is the key thing is that the utilities have to get there. So if the utilities do their thing, then we need to do less. Without the utilities, we won't get there. right? That's just not
Right.
doable. And then there are, Kyle's going to get into this, but there's not one pathway, right? There are multiple pathways and it depends where we decide to prioritize, but some combination of action on transportation and buildings is where the balance of the activity really is in terms of sector-based emissions. So we can talk about that a little bit later.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is there a strategy in place? Or is that something this commission, is expected to deliver? Or if there's a strategy in place, is that a strategy that this commission would review? That's
A
it.
lot of things are in here that
Yeah,
you will want to
okay.
look at and be like, yep, let's carry that forward. That
Right,
was a
but-
good idea. We didn't execute it enough or fully or at all. So it's a continuation of a lot of things here. Again, like the what is not mysterious, right? So we have to decarbonize the buildings.
Yeah, okay.
We have to get people out of their cars and we have to, change the fuel source and we have to, all the things.
But the real question is by how much, by when? And I guess I didn't see that in there, or, maybe it's in there and I just got weary and passed over it.
It's very, very hard to count exactly this action is going to get this much carbon dioxide
Right.
reduction by this period of time.
Mhm.
The point is we have so far to go that the number, I mean, to me, I know this is a very unpopular opinion with people who love KPIs and numbers and,
Mhm.
but if we had a building policy, a building performance policy, we would take care of about 50% of the emissions from the building sector. We would make a huge leap forward. And we can't answer the question. We have a pathways tool. We can plug certain actions in and get scenarios about how much this one strategy is going to get us towards the goal. But we know it's a combination. There isn't a silver bullet. It's a combination of a range of actions on buildings, and it's a range of actions on transportation. And we can get more granular on that.
Yeah,
We can,
okay,
but
yes.
there's a million assumptions baked into them, and you should just take all the numbers for granted and know that it doesn't really matter in terms of talking to city council. It's like the policies themselves will drive huge amounts of carbon reduction if we actually do them the way they're supposed to be done.
Yeah,
And-
and I'm not trying to resolve that here this
Yeah.
evening. I would just, I guess, note in passing, and we can come back to it sometime if it's appropriate, that at least at the state level, the state is describing the combination of the utilities obligations under House Bill 2021 and DEQ's, emissions plan as together being able to drive that line down toward the trajectory it needs to be at.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, so the
We have
question,
similar
if you get
analysis.
to it, is, is the city looking at that and reconciling our plans at the city to the plans at the
Yes.
state? And okay, then we can get to it later.
That's right.
That's fine. Thank you.
Kyle's going to talk a lot more about that.
Good.
That's all helpful questions.
Many other hands up, so. I don't
Oh,
know.
let's keep going. Should we?
There's a few of hands.
Just as a reminder though, for the people that have hands, right now is time for clarifying questions of what's covered, because some of the things that were brought up are coming up in this presentation. So if you have a clarifying question, great. If you have comments, please hold them till the end.
Who is managing the hands? Is that on us or?
Lisa.
Okay.
Commissioner Jessica.
Hi, Commissioner Jessica, District 1. I was just curious if you could storytell maybe or clarify about like the population of the county as it corresponds to this curve, because, or is that, if that's
It's
coming
coming.
later? Okay. I feel like
This is meant to be.
You guys
a
are doing great.
stylized
Yeah.
picture that's like, we're here, it's gone like this, we gotta go like this. That's all you gotta know right now.
Yeah, but it is coming. It's
Yeah.
coming. These are great.
Okay, and Commissioner Galen.
Hi, Commissioner Galen, he, him. Just in the interest of speaking the same language, and apologies if Kyle's going to get into this later, but in terms of net zero, are we looking, is it consumption based or sector based, or should I just wait and that will get covered in a little bit here?
Good, that's sector based.
Thank you.
And the next slide actually shows you our sector based emissions. Are we ready to go?
One more hand.
Oh, one
Yep.
more. No, Jessica?
Commissioner Jessica.
The legacy hand.
We heard from Jessica. Okay. Dan, sorry.
Commissioner Dan.
Hi, Dan from EM D3. I've been putting some in the chat. I don't know if it's real or not. But we have a transportation and a commercial like issue here, right? And so like this is where we need to like be thinking in terms of what we're dealing with. And it's not boundary, like it's not, we can do everything we can, but like transportation is the hugest emission by far. And so it's a behavior change, not a policy change. So it's like, how do you, what can we do for a behavior change on transportation is really what we need to start thinking about.
Thank you, Dan. You're taking the words right out of many of our mouths. It's the things we think about all the time. And I will point out, thank you for pointing out the 40% carbon emissions by sector. The 40% of those are dedicated or are from our transportation fuels and use. But I would also point out that when you add residential and commercial together, that's 42% of our emissions. So when Andrea talked about decarbonizing buildings and residential, that's like how we heat our homes, how we cool our homes, heating our water, running our commercial buildings, and that is, yeah, a large chunk as well. I think for time, let's keep moving. So you just saw carbon emissions by sector. Now you're seeing carbon emissions by source. I don't think there's any new information here. You're seeing fossil fuels and byproducts of the fossil fuel industry by source. So here's our carbon emissions. Let's keep going. You are going to get deeper dive on this. So I am not glossing. I'm glossing now, but okay. So we talked a little bit about pathways, and this slide is included because this is a scenario tool that was developed. We have technical experts, we use science, we use the data to create this tool. Behind this tool, Andrea alluded to it, are various pathways that we can plug in. So the policies and the programs that get us to net zero. So what you're seeing down the y-axis are topics, right? The sector areas that you're going to become very familiar with if you aren't already: electricity supply, buildings, and so forth. And then the x-axis is time. And what's important to understand is those 47 actions that are already in the CEW all like harken back to this pathways analysis. There's something in each one of those actions that's helping us reduce our carbon emissions in one way or another, some to a greater degree, some to a less degree, but it's all underlying this pathways analysis, like all of the actions that are in there. Let's go to the next slide. So now I want to just shift a little bit into a little more detail. I mentioned at the beginning that we divided our actions into decarbonization and resilience. You can see a list here of basically the topic areas that those actions are divided into. And then in the blue, you're seeing the primary bureaus that work on those actions. Let's go to the next slide. So I wanted to highlight a few of the actions with the caveat that I'm not a subject area expert, and you already have in your onboarding process, you will be hearing from the subject matter experts on many of these projects. I just wanted to give you kind of a flavor of what's in them. Although I will say on the first one, I am a subject matter expert because I work on the renewable fuel standard on a regular basis. Actually, Kyle and Andrea and I are both passed the policy, the updated policy, and are implementing the program on behalf of the city. So renewable fuel standard, we call the RFS, and essentially the city is able to regulate the sale of gasoline and diesel fuel at the pump within our city limits. And because of those sector-based emissions, we targeted diesel fuel in a recent update of that policy. And what that policy does is ban the sale of petroleum diesel by 2030 in the city of Portland. And the way that we're doing that is by gradually replacing petroleum diesel with a biofuel. Biofuels can be many different things. Primarily, it's biodiesel and renewable diesel at this time. That could change over time, but we're gradually increasing biodiesel and replacing petroleum diesel at the pump. The other thing that the standard or the updated policy does for us is it requires that any of that biofuel be made from a waste product. It's called carbon intensity standard. And our carbon intensity standard demands that any of that biofuel be made from a waste product instead of food. It's currently being implemented. For time, I'm going to keep moving. And I'm also going to do my colleagues justice by reading to you about these other projects because I don't want to miss anything. So the next decarbonization example is clean industry. These projects are in startup phase and just received a $20 million award from PSEF. The program will fund projects that create substantial community benefits while reducing industrial carbon emissions, air pollution, and waste. Our zero emissions freight project, this is primarily implemented by PBOT. They piloted the nation's first zero emission delivery zone in downtown Portland in 24-25. This project sent strong market signals about Portland's decarbonization commitments. As a result, multiple companies like DHL, FedEx, and Amazon have deployed new electric vehicles to downtown. In addition, e-cargo bikes were used to deliver goods, replacing large vehicles completely. Next is an example from our Water Bureau. They're doing water forecasting. And the Water Bureau just updated the city's water supply and demand forecasting analysis with the latest generation of climate models. This will inform water resource planning and investments. Bike lane projects. PBOT has implemented 2 major bike projects with the protected bike lane on 4th Avenue and the bike lane on Northeast Broadway complete. If you haven't ridden a bike here, I recommend it. It totally changes your experience of moving around the city. Building energy efficiency. We have PSEF grants that are investing over $300 million through 2029 to conduct residential energy retrofits to over 90,000 units. Next slide. All right, so these are now some resilience projects, tree planting. So between Portland Parks and Rec and BES, they planted approximately 12,000 trees over the last year. In addition, the PSEF fund called Equitable Tree Canopy Program allocated $40 million for tree planting with a focus in East Portland. And there's a community work group deciding the exact locations of those plantings. Our Springwater Wetlands Enhancement Project expands wetlands and restores native plants to about 30 acres of Johnson Creek floodplain. The project creates more space in the Johnson Creek floodplain to hold water in public green areas. It also helps to lower overall flood risk in the Lentz and Powellhurst neighborhoods. It adds over 2,000 feet of trails connecting the neighborhood to the Springwater corridor. Cooling Portland. This project has installed over 20,000 high-efficiency cooling units for eligible Portland residents. Over 30% of those people are living alone, and 48% of them are over the age of 60. This was largely a response to the heat dome, which killed over 75 people in Multnomah County in 2021. Lastly, 2 more tree projects. One is the tree in the curb zone. There's $5 million that have been allocated for street tree expansion along 82nd Avenue and street tree maintenance. $5,000 has been allocated to reduce barriers that prevent people from maintaining established tree canopy. So yeah, go ahead.
So just all of these projects are connected to the climate emergency work plan. So there are examples of things that we identified that should be done, that come out of that analysis, that have been done or substantially underway. So just want to draw the connection.
And if you had them memorized the way I do, which you don't have to, but you would see this progression. You know, our first progress report was, oh, so many things we want to do, but we can't. And then the second progress report is, wow, we actually have money to do these things. And the third progress report is now the money's finally been allocated. So you may be thinking, why aren't I seeing more trees, for example? It's because this money is like we're just getting started with so many of these amazing projects. So let's go to our next slide. This is my final slide. I just wanted to point out in the final progress report, we decided to do a look back on the last 3 years, and we created 4 categories, which you're seeing in the 4 rectangular boxes. And with those categories, we wanted to give you indicators of where we felt the actions landed. So this green colored indicator is excellent. The yellow is we're making progress, but we really need to accelerate. And that harkens back to this pathways analysis that Kyle will talk more about, the slide that I showed you. And then there's all this ongoing program work. So the first is the good news, right? Equitable investments that go directly to households and communities. This is largely PSEF funded work. This is work like the Cooling Portland program I described. These are projects that go directly to Portland residents, and they're helping them participate in the green economy, helping them save money. But it is the hundreds of millions of dollars that PSEF has allocated that's propelling a lot of these actions into the excellent category.
And I wanted to mention, because I think there are a lot of questions about how does the climate emergency work plan and PSEF work together at the climate investment plan? How are these things connected? And so the climate plans at least the climate emergency work plan came first, and the climate investment plan came after that. But back to one of the key takeaways, which is that we know what reduces carbon. It's, the buildings work, energy efficiency, it's the transportation work, as we've talked about. So when you see how PSEF has allocated their investments, it lines up with those same categories that are in the pathways analysis. So the plans, the climate emergency work plan also has a star next to every project that has PSEF funding in it. So you can see the crosswalk there. But the basic what of decarbonization was known. It was put into the PSEF code. There was an exception with transportation, which got picked up later, and there was, certain reasons for that. But essentially, the pathways and where PSEF makes investments are very closely aligned. So that's how they're connected. They may be connected in a different way going forward, but it's again based on the decarbonization science of where the carbon shows up in the economy, and that's where PSEF directs investment. So I'll leave it there for now, and we can talk about that.
So I'm going to kick it back to Andrea for the fun part, which is like the challenges that lie ahead. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge the staff in the room. I said there were 50 people behind me, but some of them are actually in the room. So could you raise your hand either online or if you're still here, staff that worked on CEW or that have actions in the CEW? Thank you. Yeah. We've got hands raised online too, so. Thanks, you guys. So challenges, Andrea, what lies ahead?
So, it took us about 32 years to reduce carbon emissions to the point where they are now. And now we have 4 years to kind of do the same amount of work in decarbonization. So not an insignificant challenge. This basically is essentially doubling the rate of reduction that we've been able to see on an annual basis. So the last inventory report showed that we reduced carbon emissions about 3%. Over the previous year. And again, carbon emissions, our data run 2 years behind. So it's unfortunate, but true. So 3% was a big reduction. We're looking at like 6 and 7% reductions year over year to get where we need to go. And again, not all of that is within our control. So it's a huge challenge. It is doable to Angus, Commissioner Angus's question. Kyle will talk about the analysis about that. But I also wanted to mention that at the same time that we're doing the hard decarbonization work, we also have to prepare the community for the impacts that are already here. And that's the resilience side of the plan. And a lot of the investments that you're seeing PSEF make also just as important as the decarbonization. So that's our challenge ahead. That's the thing that you all get to figure out, how to get into the next climate plan. And then next slide. I'm not, in the interest of time, I'm not going to, these are the key takeaways, so you can go over them again. And then finally, we'll end with a quote from our leader, Vivian Satterfield, our Chief Sustainability Officer. This doesn't follow a simple timeline. We need steady ongoing commitment. We do have the tools, the knowledge, and the resolve to lead. The what, we know what it is. But by continuing to strategically and consistently invest in climate solutions, we can strengthen our economy, support local innovation, and build a more just and resilient future for all Portlanders. Isn't it fun to be quoted back to yourself? So with that, we can open it up to more, or I don't know, Elaine, if we don't have any time for questions at this point. We're out of agenda time. Unfortunate, but we're available. We're
Just to jump in real quick, Elaine Visca Livingstone, Commission Coordinator, she, they. If you have questions, you can post them in the chat and I will send them to staff. They'll likely get them answered in the new year. Just like our last meeting, PSEF staff, we had remaining questions. Those have been posted on that event page. These will be as well once they get the answers to you.
Co-chair Issa Taylor, pronouns he, him. So for a quick time check, it is 7:10 p.m. So we'll be starting our 5-minute break. So please make sure to return at 7:15. Thank you.
What? Okay, we can everybody take your seats, 7:15. Okay, coming back. Okay, welcome back, everyone. 7:15, back from break. This was a shorter break. Okay. Welcome back. Again, I'm co-chair Jose Gabriel Georgeson, he, him, male pronouns. Now we have another briefing from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on the Multnomah County carbon emission and energy trends. Next slide, please. Link to the meeting event page is the energy dashboard. And to talk about this section, I'd like to introduce climate policy analyst Kyle Diesner.
Correct. Good job.
Who maintains emissions inventory and energy dashboard. And we've heard Kyle will tell us about this all throughout this briefing. So now I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing some of this, but I'll monitor the chat or anything. If you have questions, if you have any clarifying questions, ask along the way. If you have comments or discussion, please save those till the end. And again, thank you, Kyle, for being here. And take it away.
I do have a quick question for our staff. Elaine, do I have 40 minutes still, or do I need to trim down?
You have until 7:55.
7:55, okay. All right, you can, there we go. And you can skip ahead to the next slide. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be here tonight and talk about something that I get really passionate geeking out about. And I know some of you in the room are similar in that regard. So hopefully we can have fun with this, at least to the degree to which this can be fun. So I'm going to talk about 3 distinct resources that have really helped inform our work. So the first is our community-wide emission inventory, which we've been tracking since 1990. And then our consumption-based emission inventory, which is a different method of looking at carbon emissions. And that's, we have that for 3 years, 2012, 2015, and 2021. And then I'll also share a bit about our pathways modeling and analysis. And I hope all of these resources will be beneficial to you as a commission as you move forward in your work. And I expect that we will have ongoing continued discussion about these. So this is really very high level. At moments, maybe I'll touch into the weeds, but then I have to pull back up because we just don't have enough time. So I hope that we'll be able to dig into this more together in the coming years. Next slide. And you can skip ahead. So I'm going to start with our Multnomah County emissions, and I'll go through this fast because you guys already kind of saw most of this. So today our emissions are 26% below 1990 levels. And that's quite a departure from the US as a whole. So our emissions peaked in 2000. US emissions didn't peak until 2007. And we've been that curve down a little steeper than the nation as a whole. National emissions are about 2% below 1990 levels as compared to our emissions at 26% below. I will also note, just because it is a sign of the times, but the federal government did not publish a 2023 inventory this year for reasons that you might be able to guess. Next slide. So I just, and this came up in the last presentation, so I just want to highlight the slope of these lines and how steeply we were able to bend down emissions until about 2013. Things got a little rocky. Things emissions coming down, but not quite as steep as where they were. And a lot of that has to do with renewable energy in our grid mix, as well as changes in transportation. And you can see that big dip in 2020 is certainly a result of the pandemic. And here, thank you. She's on it. So yes. So here you can see where we need to get to, and we already covered these, so I'm not going to talk about that. This slide is a bit daunting when you look at it. And I think this next slide is actually, some good balancing on that, is that, 26 below is significant, especially given the growth that we've experienced over that period. So we do actually, we're up. Our population has grown 38% since 1990, and we've increased our jobs by 35% since 1990. So even with that growth, we've really been able to bring down our emissions pretty significantly. And that, equates to pretty significant per person emission reductions. And we'll talk about some of the sources that we're seeing that. Next slide. I think we've covered the sector-based emissions pretty well. I think these, the protocols use pretty, maybe like less public communication friendly language, like stationary emissions. We convert those into these primary sectors because we think it's more understandable to the general public. So hopefully these are clear for you. If they're not, I'm happy to answer questions on that. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about how our emissions have changed over time. This chart shows our peak emissions in 2000 compared to the most current emissions in 2023. Now, I had a great question from Commissioner Alina during the break. And so I figured I would share that with all of you, that our emissions do run 2 years behind. That is standard for every city in the US, particularly, even at the state level and the national level. And that's just because of the amount of time it takes to collect all that data from various entities, especially the proprietary data that fossil fuel companies have. It gets all reported up to the federal government process and then disseminated back out to states. And that takes about 2 years. Next slide. So, well, actually, one more point on that last slide, if you don't mind going back. You can see our most significant reductions to date have come from the industrial sector, followed by residential. And I really want to highlight the drop in our transportation sector emissions. These have been very challenging. And really just since the pandemic, we have seen those come down below 1990 levels, which, I'll get into a lot more detail about that. So I'll save that. And then you'll see all the sectors are down from their peak, except for fugitive emissions. You'll see that is ticking up a little there. It is a small source, only 4% of our total emissions. But that's because fugitive emissions, we don't have a way to account for those at the local level. There isn't local tracking of fugitive emissions. So that is done at the state level. And then we have to downscale it for Portland based on population, which means that as our population goes up, those fugitive emission numbers go up. I expect in the future, we will have better accounting of fugitive emissions. But at this point, it is based on modeling.
We have a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Commissioner Angus?
Yeah, hi, Commissioner Angus. Kyle. How much of those reductions represent response to emissions reduction interventions? We actually went in and changed an industrial process. And how much of them, reflects a change in the composition of, say, industry in Multnomah County?
Great question. Question seems to be pretty centered on the industrial sector, so I'll go with that first.
Pick that one. And that's enough. Just do industrial.
The pieces that sort of change within those vary sector by sector, but for the industrial sector, what we have seen is that there has not been much change in industrial land use. So the land in the city used for industrial activities, and there's not been much change in industrial jobs. So industrial activity in the city is pretty level with where it was, but it's been a significant change in the type of industries. So we've gone from very energy intensive industries pre-2000, like aluminum smelting that was in Multnomah County that we don't have anymore, to less energy intensive industrial processes. Now, that's not to say that we don't have energy intensive industrials, but on the whole, so much of that is, changes in their practices and their efficiency and in the type of manufacturing.
Great. Okay, thank you. I ask because I know that we have made, modest efforts to modify industrial practices, and at a state level, we have not been very successful. So I'm guessing it's the same thing within Multnomah County.
Yeah, I mean, I will note Energy Trust does provide energy efficiency work for industrials. It's a large energy user, so more efficient practices is a big way for them to save money, which improves their profit margin. So industrials have a real incentive to find solutions that are less energy intensive. So I think that's why we've seen so much progress in that sector. But a lot of it is also decarbonization on the grid, and those other pieces that are moving in there. And we could get into that more, but I don't have time tonight.
Not tonight. Thanks.
Next slide, please. So these are emissions by source, and Andrea and Pam covered this, so I'm not going to go into it in more detail, except to say, electricity, gasoline, natural gas, and diesel are our top sources of emissions. Those are really where we need to focus, at least as we're looking to get the level of reduction that we need to achieve here. I'm going to talk about those 4 primary sources in a little bit more detail in terms of the energy and emission trends in this next section. Next slide, please. So starting with electricity, our largest source of emissions, just some context. So Multnomah County, 76% is Portland General Electric territory. And this is by sales, so not just the territory, but the actual kilowatt hours. So 76% Portland General and 24% Pacific Power. Next slide, please. Here is the generation mix. And so this is a weighted average based on their sales. So it's combined for PG and Pacific Power. And you can see that natural gas is the lion's share of our generation today. Just from the year prior, there was a significant reduction in coal. So we're seeing a lot of energy transition from coal to natural gas in line with the state's no coal by wire policies by 2030. So we're starting to see progress on that, which is great. But the result of that is that natural gas has grown really significantly. We have also seen hydro and wind decline, which is a bit surprising. But that has really affected our percent renewable. So you can see I've kind of flagged the renewable energy sources in green there, and we're at 33% renewable today. It's actually down from where it was just a couple years ago. And we expect that the utilities are gearing up to hit their targets in 2030, and that we'll see more robust investment as we get closer to 2030. I see there is a question from Commissioner Jessica.
Yeah, just briefly, when you say a reduction in wind and hydro, is that a reduction in the generation or the percent, overall percentage represented?
Both.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, wind was, hydro was 25%. Just a couple years ago, it's dropped quite a bit in this most recent inventory. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about emission factors because they go so far towards driving these emissions from electricity, our largest source, and also our largest solution, right? I mean, most decarbonization, besides reducing consumption, period, like not driving your car, most solutions depend on electrification, both of buildings and vehicles. So it is really important, our grid emission factors and the fact that electricity is already our largest source of emissions. So you can see that Pacific Power's emissions have come down about 20%, and this is emissions per unit of energy. And PGEs have come down about double that, at 42%. Next slide, please. I'm adding in eGrid here. eGrid is the federal data set for grid emission factors. I shouldn't really call it eGrid. It's really WEC, Western Electric Coordinating Council. So this is the grid mix for the Pacific Northwest region. And you can see that the Pacific North region as a whole has come down quite a bit, but not quite as much as Pacific Power. Oh, correct, yes. And the reason I wanted to point this out is because our emission inventories are done on eGrid's data. So using that Western Electric Coordinating Council emission factor, so the green one. And the reason for that is because it's the only one that complies with the protocols for community scale greenhouse gas inventories. And it is the only data set that we can get to take back to our 1990 baseline. So we've been forced into using eGrid. Next slide, please. The implication of that is that we are undercounting emissions from Pacific Power. But as a reminder, Pacific Power is only 24% of our emissions. So you can see eGrid has come to align pretty closely with PGE's emissions, at least today, for 2023. But Pacific Power is quite a bit higher. So I just wanted to flag that for you guys so you know our emissions in Pacific Power territory are higher than what we're estimating in our inventory. Next slide, please. So this is our electricity trends over time. And this is really fascinating to me because you can really see the change in those sectors over time. So I've got the PGE ones in blue and kind of the green colors that smaller share that's Pacific Power. And it puts the difference in sales in context. So the chart shows total electricity in Multnomah County, but this is overall grid electricity. So this does not include voluntary green power purchases like RECs or participating in the voluntary green power programs that the utilities offer.
What are RECs?
Oh, yes, thank you. Good question. Renewable energy certificates. It's a mechanism for buying the renewable attributes of power. So you can see that, our electricity consumption has really come down from that peak in 2000, again, correlating with that trend you're seeing in our emissions overall. We've had about an 18% reduction in electricity use from the grid since 1990. And that's pretty significant. And most of that reduction is coming from industrial and residential sectors. The commercial sector, on the other hand, has been growing, and it's increased 10% since 1990, as you can see in that dark blue section at the bottom there. However, if you factor in the renewable sales, next slide, please, you can see that today, that's that gray bar at the top. So this is the voluntary green power purchases. So these don't contribute to our greenhouse gas emissions, but they speak to our total electricity consumption. And so you can see that when you factor in green power, our electricity consumption today is the same as it was in 1990. Next slide, please. I'm going to pivot here to talk about natural gas. And I only have one slide for natural gas because it is a little bit simpler. We only have one utility, Northwest Natural, and there is only one emission factor for natural gas. So this chart kind of tells that whole story. Emissions from natural gas come from heating our homes, our offices, our commercial buildings, heating hot water, industrial processes, and also on-site power plants that we have at many of our hospitals and universities. Natural gas sales are up 17.5% since 1990. So note that I've talked about many sources coming down, but natural gas is up, and it's up quite a bit. The growth has been especially strong for the residential and commercial natural gas use, with residential use up 62% since 1990. And commercial up 43% since 1990. And industrial and what you see is pipeline distribution, that is large customers who are buying large quantities of gas, so they're purchasing that gas on the wholesale market, and then Northwest Natural is distributing it to them via their pipeline system. So those are typically, they're going to be really large industrials or the power plants that we have at some of our hospitals and other facilities. So, I want to talk about this a little bit more on that slide before we go ahead. Natural gas has been one of the most tenacious energy sources, and we're seeing significant reductions in electricity and gasoline consumption, but natural gas is up, and it's still relatively affordable. There are no real market drivers that are reducing consumption or incentivizing a shift to renewable energy. This is a problem. However, I will note that the Oregon Climate Protection Program regulates natural gas suppliers by placing them under a declining emissions cap. At this point, it's unclear how Northwest Natural will comply with that beyond buying the carbon credits that will be available. Opportunities to replace fossil natural gas with renewable natural gas or hydrogen do appear limited. Next slide, please. I'm going to pivot now to talk about transportation, which is a much more complicated sector. So I do have quite a few transportation slides, so we'll move quickly here. At a high level, though, most of those transportation emissions are currently coming from gasoline, just over half, followed by diesel fuel. Next slide, please. So here you can see our transportation emissions over time, and I've graphed our percent change in gasoline and diesel sales along with that. So you can see that transportation emissions have finally started to come down. But look at the percent change in those sales. The difference between gasoline and diesel there is really pretty significant. And so we're seeing gasoline coming down, and I'll show you another chart on that, but diesel climbing really pretty significantly over the same period. And you'll notice if you look at those diesel numbers, they really start to tick up in 2020. And I suspect maybe some of you can guess why we're using more diesel today than we were before the pandemic. Any guesses?
Amazon. Yeah.
Exactly. Something that we are all responsible for. I just got a ding on my phone because my Amazon package got delivered. So we all have a role in this and we're all contributing to driving this demand. Now, gasoline, though, on the other hand, really has come down 20% since 1990, which is really surprising to me, but we are driving less and our cars are much more efficient than they were. On this, oh, I'm sorry, the next slide. So on this chart, you can see the share of our gasoline that's ethanol, and that is due to the state mandate for 10% ethanol in our gasoline blend. Next slide, please. So this is that gasoline sales, but per person, you can see how far they've fallen. We're using 42% less gas per person, which is really, really quite significant. Next slide, please. And here's a comparison of gasoline sales with price. And this is really interesting. The chart shows how gasoline sales and price tend to have a negative correlation. As gasoline prices increase, we see gas consumption decrease. Or in other words, gas consumers are price sensitive. This speaks to the benefit of pricing policies, which were recommended by Portland's Pricing Options for Equitable Mobility Task Force in 2021. Next slide, please. You can see that is not true for diesel. The diesel prices have climbed even as diesel consumption has climbed. And that's because, gasoline is more heavily used by passenger vehicles, households who can say, oh, I won't take that trip this summer because prices are high. But diesel is more heavily used for freight and shipping and delivery. And all of that is up based on consumer demand, not based on the fuel price. So diesel sales are up 70%. Diesel sales are up 70% compared to gasoline. I showed you on the other slide was down 20% over the same period. And diesel is our fourth largest source of carbon emissions.
I'm emphasizing that's a huge increase.
Yeah, it is. It's our fourth largest source of carbon emissions, and it's growing rapidly. And so this is something that keeps me up at night and speaks to why we adopted the renewable fuel standard to phase out the sale of fossil diesel by 2030, replacing it with low carbon biofuels, primarily from recycled waste greases as required by our carbon intensity standard. The RFS does increase the renewable fuel blend to 50% in 2026. You're not seeing the effects of the renewable fuel standard in this data because it hadn't gone into effect yet. But next slide. Here you can actually see the share of biofuels through 2023, the rapid growth in both diesel and renewable fuels offsetting some of that diesel consumption. Next slide, please. And I just want to give you a heads up about this. I'm not going to share the data tonight because we just don't have time to get into it, but I am developing a new transportation methodology. And we have a few years of data for that, which I can dig into with you at some point. And this is really to comply with the protocols. To date, we have done our emissions by source. I'm sorry, our transportation emissions by fuel sales. This moves us to all trips in boundary based on VMT. And that's the best practice in terms of the community scale protocols.
It's VMT.
Vehicle miles traveled. Thank you. So on road, we're moving away to this new methodology, and it's based on anonymous cell phone data. So it's looking at how Portlanders are moving around and making assumptions about that. There have been some odd anomalies in that data. So the reason I'm not sharing it tonight is that we're still validating it. But more on that soon. This provides more granularity for our non-road sources. Right now, we can't break out off-road, marine, and rail from those transportation numbers because they're based on the fuels. We don't know who's using the fuel. And so this new model is based on different data sources. So we're actually able to break out those transportation subsectors. And another exciting piece is that we're adding air travel for the first time. And I'll give you a little sneak peek at that. Our air travel emissions are just a little bit bigger than our commercial sector emissions. So it really is a big chunk that we'll be adding to the inventory here in the next year or so. Next slide, please. So our top takeaway.
I wanted to ask what air travel we covered.
Oh, okay. So our top takeaways here, we were down 26%, but we've got a lot of work to do to reach our targets. 2023 changes were primarily the result of higher emission factors for electricity, as well as changes in weather and increased use of biofuels. And I also, the new transportation method, which I'm excited to share with you more. Next slide, please. I'm going to move pretty quick through our consumption-based emissions in recognition of our time here. And this was said earlier, but our adopted targets, so net zero by 2050, does not include the consumption-based emissions. There is an international push for cities to set reduction targets for consumption-based emissions, and I expect this will be something that this group will discuss in the coming year. Next slide, please. So what are consumption-based emissions? These are the life cycle emissions that are produced as a result of consumer spending in Multnomah County, which means these emissions are produced not just within our boundary because they're life cycle. Many of these emissions are produced around the world. Here you can see Multnomah County consumption-based emissions compared to our local emissions. So the sector-based inventory that we've been talking about for most of this presentation is that red and blue. The consumption-based inventory is that green and the blue together. And I love this Venn diagram because it shows the comparison in scale. So you can see how much bigger the consumption-based emissions are from our sector-based, but it also tells the story simultaneously of where those emissions are coming from. They're being imported into our community because these products are manufactured in other parts of the world. And so our total emissions are really 20 million metric tons of CO2e, but the sector emissions were 7.1. So, 65% of our emissions resulting from consumption are not in our sector-based inventory, nor are they produced within our boundary. And yet we have a responsibility for those emissions as they are a result of our consumption and spending. One thing that's great about these models is we're really able to dig in and look at emissions by life cycle phase. And I just want to note across the entire consumption-based inventory, 66% of those emissions are coming from producing those goods. So whether we're talking about a laptop, a table, the carpet, the lights, my clothes, 66% are coming from the production. And most of that is in that share that's coming from outside of our area, because most of what we consume is not made here. I think we all know that. I want to skip ahead to the next slide, please. We're also, one more. So we can look at those life cycle phases by category, and this really helps us think about interventions. And that's why I think this data can be useful for you. As you can quickly see here, the use phase and the post-consumer disposal phase, the blue and orange, those are the phases that typically occur within our boundary. Those are the things we're typically counting when we're looking at our sector-based emissions, right? It's the use of vehicles, it's the use of lighting, it's the use of home heating. But it's really those upstream emissions, the producer emissions and the pre-purchase transportation emissions that we often call embodied carbon. And those are embodied in every product that we purchase. So when looking at these emissions, it's clear that our traditional method of climate planning and accounting using sector-based emissions is not getting at the whole picture. And the challenge is continually heightened by the fact that we continue to outsource more manufacturing. What I think of when I look at this is that it really does require us to use both supply and demand side interventions to reduce these emissions, influencing production supply chains where we can, things that are made here locally or made in Oregon, and addressing demand for those products when we can't. C40 asks cities to use all available powers to reduce our carbon emissions, and work on consumption-based emissions definitely requires the city to use our powers in ways we may not have done so in the past. Next slide, please. Here you can see our consumption-based emissions over time from the 3 inventories that we've done. And you can see that those have climbed year over year for those 3 inventories. And by the way, can I just say, I'm so excited I could finally draw a line with 3 points. But our sector-based emissions are dropping. So you can see consumption climbs as we're reducing our local emissions. And that is reflected also in the data at the state level. Next slide, please. This is for Oregon, and so you can see Oregon's consumption-based emissions are climbing as Oregon's sector-based emissions are declining. Next slide, please. So our top takeaways here, we've got 65% of our consumption-based emissions are not in this sector-based inventory. So that to me is like the elephant in the room. Big problem, flashing red lights, hello, we're not paying attention to this. And in 2021, our total emissions were 20 million, not 7 million. Consumption-based emissions are increasing year over year as local emissions decline. This is a real challenge. Production accounts for 66% of those emissions. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our Pathways model. And that was the analytical model that sort of was the basis for informing our climate emergency work plan. We have updated that model since the climate emergency work plan to account for many of the policy changes that have been made at the state level and the federal level as well. So in 2020, we hired a consultant to build this model for us to help us understand what it would take to achieve the adopted targets. And we call it Pathways for short. The model was the purpose is really to understand the scale of action required to reach the goals. Next slide, please. It's really a visualizer. And so it takes 4 distinct resources: our inventory, our vision eval modeling from the Portland Bureau of Transportation and Metro, the City of Portland's building analysis and projections tool, which looks at energy use for all of the buildings in the city. And then we use the iTree tool from the US Forest Service to look at sequestration potential. The updated version of the tool does actually include a little modeling within it for some other sectors, and that was one of the improvements. Next slide, please. I want to emphasize here that Pathways is not prescriptive. It estimates emission reductions for various strategies, and you can toggle these strategies on and off to look at let's do more energy efficiency, let's do it sooner, let's do it later, let's electrify more. And so it takes all of the known strategies. As Andrea pointed out, we know what has to be done to reduce our carbon emissions. And it allows the users to play with those things, turn things on and off, and look at how that affects the trend and whether or not we're hitting our targets. And I think that Pathways, at least I hope that Pathways will be a useful tool for you all as you're thinking about our path forward here. Next slide, please. I do want to highlight just a few kind of outcomes from this most recent modeling. And first to note that due to adoptions of policy at the state and federal level, our baseline reductions are quite a bit bigger now than they were just a few years ago. And so that's that dotted gray area you see at the top. Those are adopted state and federal policies that are driving those reductions. The gray area that's just below that are the emission reductions from climate action. So in this model, this is showing our net zero pathway. So we have modeled out a whole bunch of different actions. I obviously can't get into that detail here, but you take those off and you're left with these colored bands, which are our cumulative emissions by sector. So you can kind of see what's remaining over time. And in this scenario, we are achieving almost 65% reduction by 2030. That's largely driven by grid decarbonization, but continuing to do additional work on efficiency and transportation over that same time period. And we are reaching net zero by 2050, actually negative emissions. And the climate science says that we need to be at net zero by 2050 and then negative emissions after that point. This is the only scenario that we modeled that achieved that. So I really want to highlight that point here. Top line, net zero is possible by 2050. The change in the baseline trajectory alone has made that possible for us. However, it will take continued effort all the way through the end to get there. The biggest reductions are coming from HB 2021 and whether or not this electric utilities in Oregon hit 80% reduction by 2030. If that happens, along with much of the other work that's happening through PSEF and other activities, we will be able to hit our 2030 target, is what the model is showing us today. And, you know, I will also note that getting beyond 2030 to 2050 reduction, besides grid decarbonization, there are really 3 other priority actions that we have to accomplish. A couple of these are a little, you know, out in the future. They're small sources today. So I just want to note, obviously, the big one is transportation, and that will require 3 things. So it's not enough to, you know, the modeling shows that we have to reduce VMT, which means that we all have to drive less. We also, when we are driving, we have to switch to electric vehicles. And in addition, what's remaining after we've done as much of that as we can, we have to replace with renewable fuels. We do not have a pathway to zero that does not include those strategies. Beyond that, refrigerant management is actually going to be really important. We've seen those fugitive emissions ticking up. It's something we don't pay a lot of attention to today because there are just massive sources that we have to get to. But to get to net zero in 2050, we have to get a handle on refrigeration management. And similarly, reforestation is going to be really, really important. That green line at the bottom there is the only reason why we're getting to net zero, and that is carbon sequestration. And we're talking about really, really substantial increases in carbon sequestration beyond the levels we have today. So significant tree planting through 2050. And I have the numbers on that, but I won't have time to get into that with you today. Next slide, please. So this shows those 3 scenarios lined up. So that first, the one I've been talking about is that net zero pathway. We did look at a scenario where we said, hey, what if we didn't do anything between now and 2030 except the grid? And that would get us to our 2030 target, but we would be delayed so far in action that we could not hit the 2050 target. So it is absolutely critical that we take aggressive action now ahead of 2030 in addition to grid decarbonization. The other thing I note, that last scenario, missed targets. That's really looking at if the state misses all of their goals for these adopted policies, what happens? Guess what? We don't reach our goals either. We are very dependent on the state and the federal government, unfortunately. Now, I will also note, because this is very important, cumulative emissions. Climate change does not care how many emissions we produce year by year. It cares about the cumulative emissions. And so these scenarios have significantly different cumulative emissions, and it depends on how quickly we take action. And so you can see 20 million more cumulative emissions if we delay and we miss those targets and we don't hit those goals. But even just the grid alone scenario, 15 million more metric tons of CO2 if we don't take action today. So it's very clear that we need to accelerate our climate action now, ahead of 2030, and that we need our utility partners to reach their goals as well. So a couple of the takeaways here, you know, we can hit these targets. It's doable. We know how. We have the solutions and the technology to do this today. If adopted policies stay on track, we can, and they achieve the 80% renewable targets, we will hit the 2030 goals. The modeling shows. If the city acts aggressively now, we can prevent 15 million tons of CO2 by 2030. It's really pretty significant. And with that, I'm going to wrap up because I want to save time for questions and all that. So I do want to plug, we have a climate and energy dashboard. I know the link was sent out to you guys. It's interactive dashboard. We're constantly adding new features to it, so it's in development, but much of this data is on there and you can explore it and play around with it. And thanks for bearing with me on all these data slides. I can tell some of you love the details at least. I hope this is the start of a conversation we'll be having around this work, and I look forward to continue to collaborate with you as we develop our next climate action plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Co-Chair Manager Jorson, he, him, pronouns. We don't have a lot of time for questions, like a minute. Commissioner Casa, Commissioner Steffen.
Any questions? Commissioner Casa, she, her pronouns. Just mostly curious about your your leading edge on airline emissions, and is that they're taking off, or is the number of landings, I mean.
Great.
What's your boundary and how do you?
Yeah. So what we did is, there's a consulting firm, Parametrics, that built a model for us. And it complies with the protocols for community scale greenhouse gas inventories, the expectation for how cities are looking at emissions from air travel. So what this does is the model takes every single flight out of PDX as well as the Troutdale Airport and looks at the emissions to the first destination. So if that's international, it's the first international destination. If it's domestic, it's the first domestic destination. And then we calculate the Great Circle distance to that destination, and we use the actual fuel efficiency of the aircraft to calculate the emissions.
So we're assuming responsibility for the whole trip, the whole time they're in motion.
Correct, to the first destination. Now, but we're not counting for the arrivals. So the way we're kind of balancing that is we're counting the departures, not the arrivals. Even though, many of those arrivals are our responsibility as well.
Thank you. I had a quick question. When you talked about sector-based emissions, you showed that we were able to reduce despite population going up. But with consumption-based emission, which I would think population would play an even bigger role, you never mentioned it. So how has that impacted, like per person emissions for consumption?
I don't have the per person consumption emissions handy, but I certainly can provide those for you. Obviously, the more our population grows, the more we are consuming over time. And you can really see that in the spending too, that increases over time. So yes, it has the same effect. But
yeah,
I can provide more detailed data.
I guess the question is, are we consuming more, or are there just more of us consuming the same amount?
Yeah.
That's, that we can only eat so much less or consume so much less.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we are consuming more. It's that we have more population. And, it's the changes in the consumption, right, that really have an impact here. So we talk a lot about, the top source was food and beverages. And a lot of that is food choice, right? Are you eating carbon intensive foods or are you eating lower carbon foods? So you can have both population going up, but people are making decisions where their consumption goes down. That's not been what's happening. We're seeing kind of steady consumption and growing population.
Thank you. We have 3 minutes left. Commissioner Angus, only if it's quick.
Yeah.
And no responses.
Sure, I will defer to other commissioners if they have questions.
I don't see any of the other ones, so quick.
Okay, so.
Okay, never mind.
Yes, please, because I already taken up airtime.
So, this is Commissioner Nora. Thank you so much for this presentation. I really appreciate the heavy emphasis on the role of our utilities in achieving our city and our statewide climate goals. And I think we all recognize that the biggest challenge or one of the primary barriers to rapidly deploying renewables is lack of transmission. And I'm curious, particularly given the city's decision around PGE's recent proposal to expand the Forest Park transmission line, how the city sees its role in helping to support utilities and progress toward addressing transmission and therefore supporting our ability to achieve our 2030.
I'll address I'm not really going to speak to the Forest Park issue. It is under a legal arbitration process, so it wouldn't be appropriate to speak on. Yes, we understand that issue, and where we're, I think this ties to a lot of questions that are in the chat just about we don't have any authority over the utilities, right? There's no power that we have. We don't regulate them. They're regulated at the state. And so the power that we have tends to be political, and using the mayor's position, sometimes using city council's position to weigh in on dockets to communicate our preferences. We've also, as staff, really tried to reinvigorate ongoing dialogue with PGE, and that has, under Paul's leadership, meeting with a wide group of city staff and utility staff to continue to figure out how do we partner together on getting to their goals. So we used to have goals that were different than theirs, more aggressive, sooner, realize that we can't really do that. That hasn't really worked. So the question really is, how do we support them and go all in with them to get them to their goals? And what is the city's specific role in that? The city as a landowner and owner of facilities, as a customer, but also that's like C, capital C city, and then all of you as residents, there's actions that we can take. And we would like to get a little bit more clear with them on how to leverage the power both of the big C city and little C city together, because they are, spoiler alert, not very likely to meet the 80% by 2030 that Kyle just showed how dependent we are on them. So it's a really tricky conversation. And am I missing anything, Paul, in the back around transmission? Okay.
Thank you. And unfortunately, we're out of time, but if you have any more questions, please send them in and we'll make sure that we'll get them answered. Again, thank you so much for coming and briefing us and answering all our questions. Everyone who had questions. Now we've got to close the meeting up since we're right at 1 minute over time. Next slide, please. Our next regular meeting is skip. Make sure you fill out the feedback form that you will get after this meeting and part of the weekly high five. We do take those things into consideration and make changes according to those. So, and the next meeting, like I said, January 15th, the retreat is Monday, February 23rd, 5 to 8, in person and required. So make plans to be here. And don't forget that you have to reset your password every 90 days or it becomes a huge pain. So reset your passwords. And that is all. Thank you for coming. We're adjourned. Thank you.